Business is simple. It's just not easy. We focus on 3 things to help you run and grow your business more easily: talent, sales, and how to scale. This is the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. Hey everyone, Bryan Whittington with this episode of the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. We have a real treat today. Jeremey Donovan is joining us today, and we're going to be talking about the data science of prospecting. So the data science of prospecting, and the reason that we have Jeremey on the show is he's not only the SVP, Senior VP of Sales at SalesLoft, he's an adjunct professor over at NYU. He's done a couple of things, and my goodness, if you're not following him on LinkedIn with all of the resources that he's bringing to bear to help us out in this sales endeavor, you got to check him out. So with that said, Jeremey, can't thank you enough for joining us here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Bryan. Excited to be on. It's good to be on the other side of the mic too.
Absolutely. So, but let's start off with this first question is, knowing your background, everything you have, it should be obvious, but I guess the first question is, whenever we're looking at data science of prospecting, and what does it truly mean to lead with value, to bring value in every single conversation? What makes you such an expert? Why should we listen to you?
Yeah, well, when you ask why should anyone listen to me, I guess I'd ask my family and they would say no one should listen to me. But I mean, even more broadly, like I think I am one voice among many that you should take as an input in the way that you sell, right? So my particular voice is, as you suggested, is a very data-driven voice, and data both qualitative and quantitative. So on the obvious quantitative side, I do some of my own analytics and data science. I tap into the data science and analytics team at SalesLoft to come up with advice for people on how they should be prospecting, how they should be engaging customers. And then on the qualitative side, I am a voracious reader of fiction, nonfiction, you name it. So in the nonfiction realm, especially, I try to get my hands on every decent sales book. It's rare that I'll read one and give up. I actually did give up on one for the first time in a long time recently, which was kind of a disappointment, but I usually read them cover to cover, and then I extract from that little nuggets, right, of how to actionable information. And then I guess if I had to give a third justification for why folks should listen to me is I'm actually more of a buyer than a seller. So right, a lot of my energy is spent making decisions about what we should be buying, how we should be empowering, enabling, whatever word you want to use, our own sales team. And most of my career has been spent kind of more in buying than in selling mode. So I think, I try to come with the perspective of a buyer as opposed to like this necessarily the salesperson's perspective.
Let's start with that last one, that more of a buyer than a seller, because I noticed that you made a comment not too long ago about the challenger buyer. And you said, hey, I'd like to find some alternative language to the challenger sale or the challenger buyer. And that's what really made me think of you as in reading the challenger buyer, or the challenger customer, I guess is the right language there. It seems incumbent upon us as sellers to figure out what in the world is that buyer going through, and putting ourselves in their shoes. And how do we best, so I'll ask that one is, how are you going about doing that today? Because you said, hey, I think we should change up the language. So talk to us a little bit about you as the buyer. How are you putting yourself in their shoes, or getting it from their perspective?
Yeah, and I guess just for a little more context on that one, I think I was thinking the other day, because one of my colleagues asked me, what's the difference between sales methodology, sales process, and this other thing that we were trying to name? And that other thing was basically the difference between relationship selling, consultative selling, and what has been called challenger selling. And I originally had described those as styles, but I don't know if it was you or someone else commented really presciently on LinkedIn that you should actually think of them as approaches. And I really like that, because style implies like that is your style and there's something fixed about it. And approach is, I think, better because it's flexible. It says, hey, I need to change my approach based on the current buyer at the present time. And I'm lifting another framework there, which is from outside of sales, the situational leadership framework, which is basically that, you coach to the will and the skill of the individual on the current project at the given time. So lifting from the leadership world and applying that into sales, it's like I'm going to sell I'm going to adapt my selling approach to the given prospect at the given time. So what does that mean? It means that, like, I as a buyer am sometimes I guess I'd like to think that relationship doesn't matter too much to me as a buyer, but it probably does. Like, I think I'm influenced by subconsciously by the relationship and the level of trust that I feel in somebody. And I think that the relationship is not, let's go. I don't play golf, but if I played golf, like, it's not that. It's not go to a sports game. It's not any of that. What the relationship is that I trust the seller has my back, right? That they're going to sell me something that is going to be useful to me. And in particular, right? I mean, I think buyers' biggest fears is, like, it's not the money you spend on the product. It's if the what you spend the money on is part of a larger project, and that project fails, your job is at risk.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more at stake for buyers than just like that transaction, right? It is something much bigger. So I think the trust is in that. It's, are you going to help me succeed, not just with the implementation of your product, but are you going to help me succeed in the initiative that I'm working on? And so sometimes I'm in that mode, right? And then sometimes as a buyer, right, I am in, I appreciate the consultative thing as like a doctor, right? So the doctor is going to come in, help. I might know I have a problem, but I don't know the root cause of that problem, and I don't know how to fix it. So that's what a consultative seller does, is they come in, they help identify a problem that you probably already know you have. And then they're going to recommend, they're going to tell you your root cause is X, and help you fix it. I'm thinking about, talk about putting those two things together. One time, I wanted to provide a different view on opportunity, right? The traditional view of an op is by stage in
Right.
your CRM. And I wanted to provide more of a deal scorecard view. I wanted to take all those fields and I wanted to reconfigure them into like a MEDDIC like scorecard.
And just for the audience, a lot of people might not know MEDDIC. Can you hit that real quick? By the way, check out Jeremy's review of that. But yeah, can you hit MEDDIC real quick?
So there are a couple of MEDDIC books out there, but MEDDIC is a framework that's been around for a long time. It's a more spelled out version of BANT, right? Which people may be familiar with: budget, authority, need, and timing. MEDDIC is another sales methodology. We talked about methodologies, processes, and approaches. So it's another sales methodology, and it stands for metrics, economic buyer, decision process, decision criteria, identified pain, champion, and competition. And the C's can sometimes mean different things, but that's kind of a typical enumeration of MEDDIC. So I wanted to group these opportunity items under those categories as opposed to stages. And I went to a vendor and I said, like, hey, can you help me do this? And like, they identified, what was it I was trying to accomplish, is win more deals. And in this case, this vendor actually, and they won infinite respect for me for this, but they actually said, look, you could do this on your own. Just have your Salesforce admin do it this way, which I thought was awesome. And the company is Squid, SKUID. And like, they've gotten years of PR value, I guess, out of me for having done that. And I will, I have a degree of trust in them that they have my back, and would purchase from them because I believe they're going to do. Obviously it's going to vary salesperson to salesperson, but they have my back. So, we talked about relationship selling. We talked about consultative selling. Then there's this other thing, and I almost wish there weren't a proprietary way of describing it, but challenger selling. And like, I think the first two are the more normal modes, and consultative selling is especially the most normal mode. Challenger selling is I have an opportunity that you don't know about, that you're not taking advantage of. And I'm going to, I'm going to teach you about it. I'm going to tailor that to your needs, and then I'm going to take control and help you. That's challenger, teach, tailor, take control. And I'm going to walk you through it. I think that's super rare. Like, I don't know that I can't recall ever having bought something where I didn't have a need. I didn't know my need, right?
Right.
Where someone just said, "Hey, like this is going to triple your business. Come do this," and I didn't know about it. I don't know that that's ever happened. So I don't know how common. I don't know how common that is in
But
truth. Like it's exciting on paper, but in truth, I don't really see it.
so I have the picture of Chet Holmes, that pyramid where 3%, 7%, 30, 30, and 30, all right? 3% ready to buy right now, 7 looking in the next quarter or so. And then you have 30% that are oblivious that they even have a problem, or haven't thought about this whatsoever. 30% that it's not in the cards whatsoever, or 30% that just bought. So I have that pyramid in my mind. And our business on, I would say the demand generation side might be where you catch the people before you're at that 65, 75% of the way down the buyer's journey. If we can get demand generation where we're hitting them with the commercial insights, like as they suggest, or getting them off a status quo, because that's the real challenge, is how do you get them off a status quo? And I think that's where it plays. But to go back to what you were saying earlier in that sales methodology or approach, I think you nailed it. And what you said is, I don't think it's relationship selling, right? That's just, if I'm in enough pain, or this is a big enough issue, I'm not necessarily even going to like you. I just need to trust you enough that you're not going to get me fired, or that you can absolutely solve this. And so I think what you said earlier is that it comes down to the trust. And I'm curious, in the use of data to do this prospecting, is that where we can maybe pull in some trust and even tie into that consumer insight or commercial insight? Is that how we can pull it together to maybe more effectively and more easily build the trust?
Yeah, I mean, the way these things tie together, I think, is you often hear people who prognosticate on sales say you have to add value at every step of the customer journey. And when you ask them how, I find there's often not a good answer. And I think salespeople really struggle with that. Like, how do I actually add value? And what I think unfortunately what companies will often do is the marketing team gets involved and says like, here is value, but what it is bottom of the funnel content, right? It's a case study, it's an ROI calculator, it's something like that is so self-serving for the company that I don't think it objectively adds value. Again, putting myself in the buyer's shoes, like I ask myself, what, because that's all I can really do. I ask myself, what would give me value, or what have reps done for me that added value to me in the past? And for me, that is, give me something absolutely actionable. Give me something that I can put into place right now, whether I do business with you or not. And then, because I'm wired the way I am, I would hope that there's some data to justify that that's the right thing to do. So that, to me, quote unquote data-driven prospecting, I mean, there's sort of a few facets to it, but one of them is like bringing data as value. And another one though is using data in order to inform what you do, so that you're a little bit, you gain a little edge, you gain a small edge in a very, very noisy world. So again, just to make it even, I can't say how and then still speak in generalities. So like here's a specific, right? So I used to be in marketing before I was in sales, and along came HubSpot's website grader. And you just go to like grader, I don't even know whether it's it's like grader.something.com, probably grader.hubspot.com or whatever it was. It still exists. And like that thing, you just put in your website, and it then does a whole series of like tests, and 2 minutes later you get a scorecard of what's working and not working, and what you need to do to tune your website to get better conversion, better traffic, whatever. Like I think that's data driven value. It's actionable, and I could take that and then I could tune my site right away, whether or not I do business with them. So that's a good example of that. And then so how can I lift that for my world? So at SalesLoft, we sell to salespeople. So I'm constantly racking my brain. How do I come up with something that is the sales world equivalent of the website grader? And and then give that to our sellers so that when they're knocking on the door of the prospect, they're not also just, hey, this is Jeremy from SalesLoft. We do XYZ. Can you take a 15-minute meeting with me?
Yeah.
Like everybody does that. Or, hey, this is Jeremy from SalesLoft. Here's a case study. Here's a testimonial. Here's a whatever. Here's a super self-serving piece of content. Let's have a meeting. I think that's the wrong, like, I don't want to be prospected that way. And it is sort of prospect unto others as they would have prospected unto themselves, or as you would have prospected unto yourself, right? The golden rule or the platinum rule. So like we created a bunch of these things that salespeople can go out and give value. So a good example of that is subjectlinegrader.com. Totally free, right? You go to subjectlinegrader.com, you put in a subject line, it grades it. It's a pretty uncleverly named web experience. And it will use data science. This is where data comes in, right? Like you're giving value, but you're using data. It uses data science to figure out, should this be longer, shorter? Is this the right word? Is it the right capitalization? Should you use punctuation? Should you use numbers? Should you use like whatever? That's what I mean is like, that is a form of value. I'll give you another form of value, which is, and I'll shut up, but I want to give you guys a couple concrete examples. Another form of value is executive or peer-to-peer introductions. Among the most valuable things a salesperson could do for me is to introduce me to a peer for a one-on-one conversation, because I'm going to learn so much from that person. And we're going to talk, I'm going to have a conversation about all kinds of things, not necessarily just that vendor, but it's going to reflect well on that vendor. So that's a way to give value in a way that, again, I don't necessarily have to use their product, but they will have established trust with me. And again, I'm using the general sense of data that's probably more qualitative data, right? Quote unquote, having a conversation with somebody. It's a sort of robotic way of describing human interaction, but it's qualitative data, and there's value in that as well.
Yeah, and so a couple of things is from that subject line grader, and you're also doing book reviews, and you're also making applications. So you're summing this up for salespeople, and then also laying out all the data that you're finding, so people can take this and use it, right? So making it actionable, and I think that's one of the things that you've done really, really well. So let's talk about the process to be able to do that. Are you just naturally gifted that way with that almost solution thinking? Is there a personality type that you are, or have you trained yourself to be able to do this?
I'll say no to naturally gifted, yes to personality type, and I guess not intentionally trained myself. The way humans are, right? The way people are so much of the time is a response to how they failed in the past, right? Or is their attempt to overcome some sort of deficiency. So if I wind my own clock back to my own deficiencies, I didn't read my first book cover to cover until I was 15 years old. And I came from a family of readers. My mom, my dad, my brother, all voracious, absolutely voracious readers. And I was the odd one out in that. And who knows why? I mean, maybe it was it's cliche, to call yourself this or that, but probably I was ADHD as a kid, so that I would assume that was probably why. But who knows? Who cares? The point is, I didn't read till I was 15. So once I caught the bug, I've never stopped. And I'm reading, as I said earlier, constantly. So but it was, it was sort of to overcome, I think, an early deficiency. So I had always been reading. I had always been highlighting and underlining in nonfiction books and synthesizing for myself. And what I started to do, however many years ago, was and I'll credit actually one of my longtime friends, a guy named Matt French. He's like, dude, you're synthesizing all this stuff for yourself, because I showed him the syntheses that I had made, and he said, you got to put this out there somewhere. So with credit to him, I started to sort of share this stuff, and I originally put it out in long form, and human attention spans being what they are, even digesting a book to 5 pages is still too long form for folks. So then I got advice from another person. Her name is Monica Stewart, and she is or was, she's probably still there at a company called Scaled Consulting. And she said, hey, chop this up and do it one chunk at a time. So, with Matt's guidance, with Monica's guidance, I started to sort of chunk it up, and do it one tip at a time on LinkedIn. And I've continued to do that. I don't post every day, but I post when I post when I feel like I have something actionable to say. And I think that's part of it, is like I'm it's I'm living by whatever that the golden rule or the platinum rule, but in the social realm, which is I will only share content that I myself would have been delighted to consume. And I don't put, it's like data. I don't put video. It's all source attribution and sample sizes and statistical significance. I deviate from that very, very rarely. Funny enough, I did slightly deviate from it today because, as I said, I read in all domains, and there's a book some people will know of. It was very popular a few years ago. It's called Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. It is like a bear of a book, and I only recommend books I've finished, and I haven't finished it. I started this book years ago. I stopped. I just couldn't take it. It's a notoriously challenging book, and I'm reading it again right now. And the passage I just read was about he's talking about, he has a little, it's the real world, but with some modifications. And one of them is that there's this sort of communication, video and telephony network that exists. And he talks about how people went from phone to video. And then once they had video, they realized that like they needed their faces enhanced. And then when the video got higher resolution, they needed like full body prostheses to make their bodies enhanced. That eventually just went back to phone again, because I posted something related to that on LinkedIn today. I'm like, phone goes to Zoom goes to virtual backgrounds. Then I've got colleagues who are talking about unisex under eye makeup. Then I'm sure we're in the not too distant future, we're going to have like filters that actually digitally enhance our faces and clean us up. And then we're going to go.
They already have that on Zoom.
Yeah, I believe it. And then the next thing is like whatever that deep fake stuff is, where you see Obama talking, but it's not him. Like that's going to be us. We're just going to have a virtual likeness of ourselves, and then we're just going to say screw it and go back to phone. So I just tickled by that. So I posted that with source attribution to David Foster Wallace.
Nice. And they I got an email the other day for deep fakes, for deep fake videos, that you can do prospecting deep fake videos. So it's already there. It's insanity what they have going on. So let's tie this back to, okay, so we're doing all of these things, and to put it mildly, that's going to take some time to start building this up and doing these things. Let's talk about the situational leadership then. Me as a leader, I see my salesperson, my sales team doing these type of things. And I pulled up while you were talking, I pulled up a book that I read not too long ago, called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And
Yep.
it talks about a lot of times it's those that are slower taking off because they're helping other people, that those are the ones that they although they start slow, they just ramp and explode and do really, really well. So talk to that person about, okay, you see this person putting in the heavy lifting and the hard work, but we still need to make the quarter. We still need to make the month. Talk to that person. What should I be doing?
If I got the question right, it's sort of like, a broader question I've seen is, should salespeople be investing time and energy into, whatever their public persona? And I think there are different schools of thought on this one. Another book, and it's escaping me who said this, but they basically are. It might have been Jason Jordan. Argued that like salespeople shouldn't spend time building public personas, and he addressed the elephant in the room, which is like, but dude, you're writing books. And his response is, I'm that person who wrote this book is a professional consultant. Like their job is to build brand in that way. But for salespeople, I don't know that that's the best use of time. I have been recently interviewing top sales reps. I'll ask people who's the best rep in your company, and then I'll interview that rep. and very few of them are active on social media. And most of them, I mean, because they're just so focused on, on the business, on managing the opportunities, on managing their customer base. So I'm not I'm not one to say that I think salespeople should be doing this. If they want to do it, then I have maybe two thoughts on it. One is, this reminds me of it was like the worst. It was the worst annual review I think I ever had. And the annual review went like this. I thought I had a great, like, it's bad when you think you did great and then you get negative review. So I thought I did great, because like, I have a tendency to color outside the box, right? I want to get all these I think of things, I want to get them done, whatever. My boss said, like, you did a massive amount, congratulations. The problem is that there was a box of things that you needed to do, and you filled in like 3/4 of that box, and you filled in a whole other box somewhere else, but that little 1/4 of the box mattered, that I had committed to doing that 1/4 of the box, and my boss had committed to his boss, right, to get that done. And so it was sort of a surprise, an unpleasant surprise, that didn't get done. And that really stuck with me. And I think this applies here too, which is, like, if you're a seller and you have an awesome social media presence, but you don't hit quota, that's bad, right? Like, quota is your box. So I think the evangelism or whatever else value added stuff that you do, make sure you're hitting quota first and foremost. And I've seen this, right? Like, I think some of the folks who are in companies, they develop a great, sort of persona, and then they leave and end up, either at a different company or trying to start their own kind of consulting thing. I think what happened is that they spent so much time on themselves that they didn't fill in the box, like they missed quota. So anyway, that's kind of one piece of guidance. And I said there were two pieces of guidance. So the second one is like, create for yourself. And so put out there what you would want, and do it with no expectation. So if for those who write, either write books or poetry or whatever, like, you do that for yourself, because it is a labor of love to do that. And I think it's the same thing with this, is like, I put that stuff out as a way for me to learn. And like, I'm grateful that folks see it now, but yeah, every day every day that you have something to say, put it out there, but otherwise don't do it.
Now, you also talked about you're creating your own data, but you're also sourcing it from others. So we don't have SalesLoft on our back end, right? We can't look at all that source data. So recommendation to somebody that's trying to do this on their own, again, to drive value, if they truly want to do this, because it seems to me what you're suggesting is put others first, right? Focus on others first. And then as you're focusing on them, be the problem solver from all of the study that you've been doing. So I noticed, I mean, my goodness, you might have been ADD, like you said, growing up, and you only did your first book at 15, but you went to Cornell, for goodness sake. So you kind of have had
I read a lot of books after that, a lot of books after that. And it was different times. Also, one of my kids is in the college application process right now. And my goodness, like, a lot of pressure on these kids today, and it's so hard to get in. Like, I wouldn't have gotten in there now with what I had then, you know what I mean? But no, re-ask me your question. Sorry, I got off on the college tangent.
No worries at all. But that goes to it, right? We don't have all of this background information, and you're learning for learning's sake. That's why one of the things that I noticed about you being you're an adjunct professor over at NYU. There's no reason you need to do that. You're busy enough as it is, yet you're still doing that. So it seems like, yes, I need to be others focused. Yes, I need to be a consummate learner. So, reading constantly, but then making application of it. And then I think that you said this, but I might have been making stuff up, is that, hey, the best way to learn oftentimes is teaching others by making that application of what you learned and then sharing that. So if I don't have, so I guess if I don't have SalesLoft back end, how can I
How do
start to
you do
do that?
this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the reminder on that. There was I'm always bringing in other things. At one point I was reading books about storytelling, and one of the things in storytelling is like if you tell stories and your hero um, is like has things that no normal mortal can do outside of superhero movies, it's hard to relate to those characters, right? Because you want people want to learn from what they can do. So taking abstracting that to this, which is like if I was an engineer, if you weren't an engineer, if you don't have a stats background, right? If you don't have access to SalesLoft's back end data, like how can you do what I do? And I think it's quote unquote easy, which is the way I would do it is I would just basically Google any studies that have been done, and there's always like state of sales, state of customer success, state of this, state of that, but I'll just put like B2B sales study or B2B sales survey or whatever, and just go out and find all those surveys and then read them and chunk them up, right? And just cite the stuff that as you know what's uninteresting is that whatever 60% of the respondents to this survey were from industrial manufacturing. Like I can't use that. What is interesting is like is I don't know that 60% of companies actually what's more the studies that are most useful, and this is why I got stuck on that one, are the ones where they have actually differentiated high performers versus low performers. So if they were to say like high performers are far more likely when selling to include a sales engineer early in the sales cycle, like that I can do something about. Or there was one that was kind of funny, which was there's a correlation. It's not everything's correlation, not causation. It's very difficult to prove causation, but there's a correlation between swearing and deal close rates. Like that's fascinating to me. So that's the sort of thing that is actionable and interesting and that you could get out of studies that have been published. And as long as you source attribute, which one always should do, I think that's totally cool. And and you can, mention the people that you're sourcing as well. And they appreciate that. So yeah, you can do this on your own by just Googling all the amazing content that's out there. So, there's creation and there's curation. And for the industry you serve, be a curator. I serve salespeople, but if you serve industrial manufacturers, right, be the curator of interesting, actionable insights for people who work in industrial manufacturing that you sell to.
So let me feed this back to you. To sum that up, it's really, hey, Google studies that are already out there. So that swearing attribution was, I can't remember if it's Gong or
It was
Chorus,
Gong.
but yeah, Gong. But you have to make sure they swear first, I think is the key to that one, right? So as long as they're swearing, go for it.
Swear back at them.
Yeah, exactly. So we can do Google the studies, chunk it up, put yourself, now you didn't say this, but I was kind of thinking through it as you're going, put yourself in their shoes to figure out what their likely problems are, because I believe the way that you build up trust and relationship is that relatability, that relevance to the conversation. So if you can figure out the likely problems, and if you can't do that, ask around or call a couple of people up and just get some ideas. Or my goodness, I think you can even Google their title, their industry, biggest challenges to face, and boom, it's right there.
Yeah.
And then from that information, then offer new approaches to solve that problem. And going back to your original, I can't remember it was started with the S, that company that does that you were working with Medic to try to figure that one out. That company again was
Squid, SKUID, Squid.
Yep, Squid. Like Squid did, they're getting massive PR off of doing this and didn't even get paid for it. And they likely have a better evangelist in you than any one of their clients right now.
I'm a huge evangelist. Absolutely.
Yep. So I think that that might be a way if you want to, if you wanted to really put practicalness to it, it's Google the studies, chunk it up, Google the biggest challenges of that that title, that industry, put yourself in their shoes, figure out how to solve that problem for it, and then offer your solution when appropriate. And if not, just solve the problem. They're going to love you like Squid.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Another one I would throw in there, like, is let's say you find an article, rather than here's an article that might be interesting to you, sure, forward the article, but take out of that, here's an article that you might find useful. And here's one, here was the biggest key takeaway for me from it. And that can just be a quote out of it. But again, like, make sure that's your company may have produced it, but make sure it's not self-serving bottom of the funnel. I refer to it as, I shouldn't refer to it as garbage, but it's basically, garbage. That stuff is a throwaway. Make sure it's something that I can actually use whether I do business with you or not.
Okay, so to sum that up, maybe it's looking at all of the information out there, find out what might be surprising to you, sum that up, and point out why it's surprising and how they'd be able to apply it. And that way, it's not
Absolutely.
that bottom of funnel self-serving kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Got
Absolutely.
it. All right. Well, that's oh, all right. So biggest mistakes that we should maybe avoid whenever we're looking at data. One thing that I've gotten time and time again from this conversation is, hey, if it's boring or isn't going to be helpful whatsoever, just blow it off. But what other things might we not be thinking through as we're looking at data to share to bring value? What should we avoid maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the objections that like sometimes I'll have what I'll call, I guess, a data hater, right? Like, they just they don't like it, they fight it. And I think there are legitimate concerns, right? So the things to look for data, one is that correlation. We talked about this once before, but correlation does not mean causation. And and but that's okay. It's like, I would rather see a correlation than go in with nothing. And if I can go in and, like, try something that's correlated, like using hey, and the effectiveness will run out over time, but using hey is correlated with higher response rates in email. Like, if I say, you know, hey Brian, as opposed to just Brian or hi Brian or what have you. And so, like, I'm going to try it. If it works for me, great. If it doesn't work for me, then I move on. So I think that's kind of one thing, is just, accept that correlation is not causation, but don't let that prevent you from doing it. I think the other thing that's important, but I think this is harder for lay, I'll call it lay people, like non-statisticians, is I'm really wary when I see findings that don't present sample sizes. And the reason is because um, 15, let's say you're y- y- let's compare the numbers: 15% like likelihood of somebody buying to, say, 10% likelihood of someone buying, right? That seems like a big difference, right? 50% higher chance, 15 over 10. um, but the deal is, if you have a small sample size, then 15 and 10 may not actually be statistically significantly different. That you can't statistically distinguish between a 15 and a 10 if the sample size is small. And so I get wary when I see findings like it's 50% better to do XYZ, but they don't tell me the sample size or the Z score. But I think typical people, don't don't necessarily look at that kind of thing, and that to me is important. And I get bothered when I see stuff like that. And I think you should just be warier. Maybe that's the advice I have, is non-statisticians should just be warier when they don't see sample sizes.
Now, how big of a sample size would you say would be significant?
It depends, but there's, like, you can actually, so whenever I see data, I have this little app. There's an app for everything. So there's a website that, if you just Google Z-score calculator for two population proportions, it'll take you, you'll find one of these little calculators, and you can put in, the 15%, the 10%, what the sample size is, and it will tell you whether or not that those two numbers are statistically significantly different. I would say that, um, the usual rule of thumb in stats is you need about 30 samples before something becomes significant. So 30 to 50 usually is about the right number. Um, So yeah, for on each one of those. But like if I compare, if I had sample sizes of 30 and sample sizes, and then I had those 15 and 10, um, turns out that at 30, that is not statistically significantly different, right? That 15 and 10 with a 15% and 10% with a sample size of 100 of 30 is not statistically significant. It takes actually, upwards of about 200 samples until maybe even more actually, until those numbers get statistically significantly different from each other. So anyway, that's the point, is just be wary. And yeah, I would say for most differences, you're looking at probably hundreds.
Okay.
You get mildly comfortable at 50, but if you're being strict about it, you want to see hundreds.
Nice. Okay. So really look for 100, 200, because I'd heard in the past that 200 is kind of the sweet spot, but I was surprised about the 30 to 50. So we can at least look at 30 to 50, depending on what it might be, really drive to that 100, 200 plus. And that would be for A/B testing. I mean, would that cover
Anything.
basically
Yeah.
everything? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All
So
right. So
at 200 samples, a 7% delta becomes significant, right? So like 10% versus 17%, you can distinguish between them.
okay. Interesting. Got it. Now, and then the other thing that you said is correlation doesn't equal causation, but that does give you the idea for your hypothesis. And then it's that lean startup idea, that minimal viable product. Let's test that thing 100 to 200 times and then measure it. And then anyway, all right, we're salespeople. We are notoriously not terribly detail oriented. How are we tracking this stuff? What are we doing with it? Any best practices there for us notoriously non-detail oriented people?
Yeah, I mean, most assuming you're using some kind of a sales engagement platform or whatever tool, like most of them allow you to A/B test. So you don't have to know the math. It will just tell you when something is better or not. But I think it's also just I think it's okay to, the human brain is a very powerful processor. It has its biases, but I think it's okay to let your brain figure out whether things are working to an extent. So, try stuff and see if it works. And if you don't have whatever A/B testing going on, I don't think you should. Again, I don't think it's in the same way. I don't know that salespeople should be building massive social media presences unless they're hitting quota.
Yeah.
And even if they are hitting quota, it's hard to say. But I think it's the same thing. And like, unless you're wired to be a data scientist or that's something you want to eventually do, I don't know that that's the best use of your time. Um, but but for some people it is, because they want to go into sales operations or they want to go into engineering. Like they usually, more often than not, the salespeople I've known who've learned to program and who've learned data science tend to not be salespeople 2 years down the road.
it's a uniquely different skill set. So got it.
Yeah.
All right. So hey, get the hypothesis. If you're not hitting quota, don't even think about this. Just tally it and just get that gut feel down.
Yeah.
Go to your sales ops folks, reach out to Jeremy and figure out what he's got to say. And there's so many resources out there. Just go do those things. Got it. Well, now how about this? I mean, a best business hack, whether you want to talk about for talent hiring, whether you want to talk about sales, how to best utilize, or for scaling up the business. I mean, one best business hack that you can share with us. I mean, you got a bazillion of them, so it's gonna be hard for
Yeah.
one.
I'll give you two, but I'll do one really quick. The one really quick is I've done a lot of data analysis on hiring, since you mentioned hiring, and found, unsurprisingly, that when you are hiring, you want to hire somebody who spent at least 24 months actively, like at their immediate prior employer. And I will say, like, that gets me some heat when I share that. And I will tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, like, I had a 16-year run at one place, and then I had like under 24-month runs at a couple of places. So that would have made me unemployable to me. And but if you're hiring at scale, you need some things in order to set as criteria. So like that is a hiring hack to get better talent. It's more expensive talent, but you'll get better talent that way. And again, like, people, like, people end up under 24 months for reasons that are completely out of their control, right? The company implodes, they had a bad manager, there was discrimination. Like there's a lot of reasons, and my heart and my empathy goes out to those folks. So yes, like you do also need to be a human being and look into other factors. But so that's one. My other one though,
Can I
yeah,
dig down a little bit more deeply on that? So how
yeah.
about, would you even use that 24 on a, call it an SDR, where it's more of an entry level, just getting started?
So in fact, I have done the analysis on SDRs, and it turns out that the best hiring profile for an SDR is someone who worked for 2 years at a recruiting agency, and you hire them out of a recruiting agency with 24 plus months. That is the single
Interesting.
best SDR profile.
And would
Much
they be
better.
the,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, would they be the recruiter or the person doing sales for the recruiting
they
companies?
were the recruiter.
Interesting.
They were the
Okay.
recruiter. That's the single best profile. Um, and I've studied the SDR hiring like extensively. The other good profiles, it's very, very, very rare. But if you can find someone who had a STEM degree, so just decide they wanted to go into sales, super rare. But those people are disproportionately successful.
Kind of like you.
Military, ex-military, disproportionately successful. Ex-teachers, ex-lawyers, disproportionately successful. AEs who decide to take a step, and this is not uncommon. AEs who decide to step, like maybe they got promoted to AE too, quote unquote, too early, and they decide to go to a better company and take a short-term step back, quote unquote, into SDR. Those people are awesome as well. So yeah, it absolutely does apply. You can get a cheaper SDR, but cheaper does not mean higher ROI, right? Like you may pay more for one of these other types of profiles, but you will get more out of it. They're more likely to stay and be successful in your company.
Have you given any thought to why STEM, why teacher, why lawyer? I mean, those are fairly academic. I mean, teacher is typically a learner. A, a STEM is going to be one that can follow process. Why lawyer? That one's throwing me.
Well, your hypotheses on the other ones I think are spot on. With lawyer, it's also like a lawyer is researching, and that's a fundamental component, right, of being a good SDR. A lawyer is also uh, an incredible time manager because they're billing in 15-minute increments. So they're extremely efficient with their time. They can read and process information incredibly quickly, right? They have great communication skills. So I think that, yeah, that's zero surprise. And I talked to a lot of CROs, and that's also another one that's like, there are so many CROs who actually went to law school, maybe worked for a year or two as a lawyer, and gave up on that for sales. It's like, I'm looking for statistical aberrations. That is one of the statistical aberrations, is lawyers who become CROs.
That's really interesting. And I would think another piece of that is, we call it in assessment tools, we call it high need for approval, right? It's more important for me to be liked than to get the sale or to get to the next steps or whatever the case may be. And I would think, I like Daniel Pink's stuff. He calls himself a recovering lawyer. And
Mm-hmm.
he would say that lawyers are one of the only, I think it was Daniel Pink, it might have been Blink. I can't remember who wrote Blink and Tipping
Oh,
Point.
that's Gladwell.
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell, where he said if being optimistic was a key characteristic or key trait for every single other job function except for lawyering, so that they don't have any need for approval for the most part. So that's really, really interesting. Okay,
Which
so I love that. So 24 months as a recruiter, or it came out of an academically rigorous background like STEM, teacher, lawyer, or has the discipline of military. So that is awesome. And you said you
Yeah.
had one other.
Oh, yeah, sorry on that one, since we were on that one for a while. There's one other thing which is a great debate in the sales world, or I don't know if it's a debate, people believe it to be true, which is ex-athlete. And I studied that too. And it turns out that if you look at enough data, whether or not somebody was in sports doesn't actually matter, which is way counter what everyone believes. There is an asterisk on that, which is whether they were in an individual sport versus a team sport. So if somebody was in an individual sport, that does correlate with success in sales. whereas if they were in a team sport, not correlated. And I think there's sort of obvious reasons for that, right? Is that sales is much more, yes, it's a team sale much of the time these days, but so much of what you do is like competition in your own head and drive and intensity and so on. So whatever that is, you know, gymnastics, swimming, tennis, whatever the sport is, those individual sports are the ones that are correlated with success.
Interesting.
My other quick one was one of the nuggets of wisdom I got, and since you guys talk about scale also, was a nugget of wisdom I got from a CEO I worked for, and we were in this meeting, and somebody came up with an idea, and it seemed like a reasonable idea, and somebody else in the meeting said, "Oh, but that won't scale." Right? Like you hear that all the time. It's a way to it's an idea killer, is to say, but that won't scale. And that usually ends the conversation. And with credit to the CEO, he said, you can't scale. His rebuttal was, you can't scale suck. And I didn't understand at the time. And I met after the meeting, I went and I asked him, like, what does that mean? And it means kind of what it sounds like, which is, you have to protect fragile young ideas, and you have to sort of, within reason, if you know it can't possibly scale, obviously don't do it. But if there's like that gut feeling that you can sort of do something, at that on paper pilot, manual, like, go do that and then iterate on that. You're going to learn. There's so much value. So that's my other tip, is outside of sales, it's don't, even in sales, I should say, don't worry that something isn't scalable. Try it within reason, and then you can tune and increase the productivity of whatever that motion or action is. Let's bring this full circle. Let's go back to the website grader. I'm sure there was a very early version before the website grader was a totally automated thing, where like some human, right, was like going to the website and calculating stuff by hand and then generating a report. I can tell you, like with our subject line grader, we have 5 or 6 of these different little utilities. Like in the early days, we were running data science, literally putting in a word and then running a query for a day to figure out whether that word was more powerful, was correlated with higher success in prospecting. And then over time, right, we learned and we figured out a way to make that so automated we could give it away for free. So I think that's the thing, is like, remember, you can't scale suck as a way to protect fragile young ideas.
Yeah, and it goes, it goes back to, there's nothing new under the sun, that minimal viable product. And I'm starting to tackle a little bit more design thinking. I've just started off on that, but it goes into that design thinking, testing your hypothesis, making those minimal viable products, putting it to use, and then just constantly tweaking. So I love that. Those are really, really, I hope that you're taking that. That was golden right there. Now, other resources that you might recommend, what should we be reading, whether books or podcasts, some guides out there? Definitely plug yours.
Yeah. So whatever, you can only read what excites you, so yeah, read what excites you. You can't force yourself to listen to podcasts if that's not your gig. For the stuff that I put out there, yeah, absolutely follow me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to reach me as well, is to message me on LinkedIn. We do a podcast as well, the Hey Salespeople podcast. And then we put out all this stuff that you'll see in my LinkedIn feed. So I'm not going to promote it individually, but like we put all this free stuff for salespeople to use, like email grader and subject line grader, and all these other things. So happy to put that out in the world.
Now, and we'll go back and sum up some of the books that you've done, but I think that I saw in a post the other day that, didn't you co-author a book too?
I have, yeah, I've written a bunch of books and co-authored a couple of them. The most recent one was Leading Sales Development, that I co-wrote with Aaliyah Homison. So we work together, but we're birds of a feather in that we both are like revenue strategy people, and we like to geek out on sales, CS and marketing stuff.
Nice. Is that on Audible yet, or?
I don't know if that I should know. A bunch of my books are on Audible. I don't know if that one is. I got to check.
We'll check it out. All right. So
I should
I'll
know that.
I stumped you. Sorry. All right. So that's really cool. So definitely, and I'm telling you, gang, Jeremy's doing so much stuff out there. Definitely check it out. He brings a wealth of information and really knows his stuff. So, futures that you're looking at. I mean, what are you anticipating coming down the pike? What are you watching for so you can stay ahead of the game?
Yeah, I was once asked, like, what do I think sales is going to look like in 5 or 10 years? And I mean, I honestly don't know. I think that's a really hard question to answer. I'll tell you what I'm looking at right now. I'm paying a ton of attention to customer success, which I think has not is just. I love when sort of data and process begin to really transform business segments. So it happened in marketing. It's like well maturing in sales, and I think that's coming to customer success next, and HR too, I would say. But like that to me is super fascinating. So I'm thinking about the future there. I'm also thinking about the like we're very much at the cusp here where and we've seen already a few companies who do this. It's sort of like Grammarly for sales emails, that as you type your sales email, it will tune it for you. And it's
Hmm.
not to take the genuineness and sincerity out of it. It's just to prevent yourself from making the equivalent of grammatical errors in the sales world. Like,
Right.
don't do something stupid. And it's not meant to make everything homogeneous. It's just meant to make it, again, like sales grammatically correct. So I think that's coming. That's not a prognostication. Like, there absolutely are already companies who are doing that. The other super fascinating thing to me is that we're finally getting the benefit of machine learning applied to opportunity management.
Hmm.
So systems are now. I mean, even SalesLoft has a component of our deals functionality that will tell you where there are gaps in your deal and red flags. So that's another thing, is like being proactively notified as a rep that this deal is in trouble when you may not even realize it's in trouble, and
Wow.
making proactive recommendations for what to do next. So I think we're finally getting the benefit of some of that stuff after a lot of broken promises over the years.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that you were doing that. So that's a whole another show to begin with. All right. Well, hey, listen, you've been so generous with your time here. I really, truly appreciate it. So who should reach out to you? How should they do it? And why should people be reaching out to you here, Jeremy?
Yeah, anyone, especially salespeople, reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. Just like, don't try to sell me right away. Build some trust. Build some trust first. And I don't need you to personalize the invite. In fact, I think I'm more likely to accept your invite without personalization than like some goofy robotic personalization.
Yeah, nice. So reach out through LinkedIn there. Love it. We'll put that in the show notes. So Jeremy, I cannot thank you enough. Great insights, great stuff. I appreciate it. Keep putting out the good content, tons of value given. So take this, gang, take this, do something with it, right? Knowledge for knowledge sake is pointless. Let's do knowledge for application sake, and let's get after it. Make some communities thrive through awesome sales and entrepreneurship. Thanks, everyone. Get after it. See ya.